As blood trickles from her lip, Yada Prescott remains silent. Dialing the direct line to Supreme Command, a black, unmarked SUV rumbles into view, its occupants faceless but armed with ultimate authority. The two local cops only realize too late that they've crossed the wrong officer, cuffed and kneeling before federal power. But that's not the final act. The justice system has been set in motion, and the truth is about to prevail. Keep watching to catch every heart-pounding moment. And remember to subscribe for more inspiring, powerful stories like this. Under the blistering heat of a summer midday, the distant horn of a truck echoed and then faded into the stifling air. Lieutenant Colonel Jade Prescott, Sanchez, pulled her charcoal-gray sedan up in front of an abandoned auto shop, where rusted steel doors groaned with every passing breeze. She cut the engine and drew in a deep breath. Trying to steady her mind, her mother lay in the hospital, her life hanging by a thread. Blinding sunlight glittered across the windshield, casting a patchwork of light on the hood. Jade glanced at her GPS screen. The green route indicator blinked. Only a few turns remained before she reached the hospital. Beads of sweat tracked down her temples to her ears. But her expression stayed calm. Every movement radiated that unmistakable military poise. Her olive uniform was neat and devoid of insignia or ribbons, perfect for avoiding undue attention. Or so she believed. The surrounding stillness was so complete that she could hear cicadas droning atop the corrugated tin roof and the clatter of empty bottles in an overflowing trash bin. A lone black woman in uniform standing in a vacant lot would naturally draw stares. Yet Jade refused to let it distract her. She locked her car, slung her small carry-on bag over her shoulder, and strode slowly toward the shop's entrance. Each footstep cracked against the fractured concrete, dredging memories of her grueling training years when she learned to master every instinct. The sky overhead was clear save for a few idle clouds drifting by, as if the entire city sweltered under one unrelenting blanket of heat. Suddenly, the sharp screech of tires tore through the silence. A white patrol car, no sirens, but alternating red and blue lights, flashing, braked hard in front of her. The turn signal never blinked, only that harsh, metallic skid echoed. Two white officers leapt out. The first, broad-shouldered and flushed red, as though he'd just sprinted. The second thin, with sly, contemptuous eyes and a mocking grin. He adjusted his belt and rested a finger on his holstered weapon in a silent dare. Jade halted, standing perfectly erect. Ish razorharpsh. Voice measured, "Good afternoon, officers. May I help you?" Her words struck like a gauntlet, and tension rippled through the air. The lean officer spoke first, his voice a low rasp. "What Halloween costume are you wearing? Party Depot special?" he snickered, scrutinizing her olive attire from head to toe. Jade inhaled softly and answered plainly but firmly, "I am Lieutenant Colonel Jade Prescott of the United States Army." She made no flinch, her hand brushing lightly against her bag strap, as if to underscore that this was no joke. The two officers exchanged derisive glances. Then the bulky one smirked. "Lieutenant Colonel." "Huh? I don't need you proving yourself to us, civilians." His words cut like a blade. Yet Jade remained silent, studying every micro-expression on their faces. Her eyes flashed icily as the second officer slowly drew his handcuffs. "Or maybe we should take you down to the station and check out this fashion statement," he muttered. Jade's tone sharpened. "You have no legal basis to detain me without cause." Her unwavering confidence made them hesitate until, in the next instant, the bulky officer stepped forward again, growling, "In this zip code, uniforms don't mean squat." His hand clamped onto her shoulder and yanked her toward the car. Her cheeks scraped against the metal with a faint rasp. She pressed her lips together against the sudden pain, but continued to track their movements with absolute clarity. Jade closed her eyes briefly and spoke one last warning before their arrogance escalated into violence. "Do you realize you're violating the Constitution?" No sooner had the words left her mouth than the pull intensified, twisting her left shoulder. Blood welled at the corner of her mouth, staining her collar. The large officer laughed harshly. "Where's your army now, Colonel?" Instead of crying out, she curled her lip into a defiant sneer. "You're both about to end your careers." The declaration struck them like a hammer. Both recoiled in surprise as the air grew thick. Bracing for the next confrontation, Jade knew she would not back down from as the scrape of metal still rang out in the sweltering air. The lean officer suddenly let out a mocking laugh, as though savoring a darkly ironic comedy. "What? A cheap Halloween costume? Did you buy it at Party Depot?" "Ma'am," his voice was hoarse, his eyes scrutinizing every seam of Jade's olive uniform as if it were a joke. Jade did not bother to smile. She drew in a slow, deep breath, then lifted her chin and spoke in a crisp, commanding tone between the two hostile men. "I am Lieutenant Colonel of the United States Army." The words Lieutenant Colonel sounded like an order, and for a moment the tension around them fell silent. The burly officer, broad-shouldered and imposing, smirked and let out a derisive sigh. "Lieutenant Colonel. Huh? You sure about that? I don't need anyone proving anything to us civilians." He stepped forward, his face flushed from the heat and perhaps from irritation at her unshakable demeanor. Jade replied firmly, "Detaining me without cause is a violation of the Constitution. You must follow the law, not your personal whims." Her words carried the weight of legal authority. But the two officers only exchanged sneers. The lean officer drew a pair of handcuffs from his leather pouch, the metal glinting in the sunlight, and said with a crooked grin, "Let's see how this Lieutenant Colonel fantasy works out for you." His movements were lightning quick as he reached behind Jade, intent on securing her wrists. But she stepped back a pace, her voice a calm warning. "You have no right to detain me arbitrarily. Stop now before you violate any more statutes." Jade's hand remained relaxed, poised near her shoulder bag in case she needed to produce her credentials. The officers hesitated, as if taken aback by her composed posture and steely gaze. Seeing their hesitation, the burly officer shrugged, advanced 2 steps, and snarled, "In this neighborhood, your uniform doesn't mean squat. You're just a black woman in cheap clothes." He clamped one hand on her shoulder and shoved her against the car. The thud of flesh meeting metal sounded sharp and final. Jade held her breath, pressing her lips together to keep from tasting blood. Yet her eyes did not waver. Her resolve etched clearly across her features. The force of the shove brought back memories of countless survival drills, where she learned to turn pain into disciplined focus. In that instant, the click of handcuffs sounded like a drumbeat announcing impending violence. The lean officer whispered to his partner, "Proceed." The burly officer gritted out, "Hands behind your back." He pivoted to wrap his arm around her waist, but Jade straightened instantly, legs braced like steel pillars. In a low, resolute voice, she said, "If you take another step, I will hold you accountable in federal court." The scorching sunlight slanted between the officers and her, tracing a line like the boundary between law and overreach. Anger and confusion flickered across their faces. The lean officer squinted, glancing toward the patrol car, as though seeking backup. The burly one took a long breath, his hand pressing harder on her shoulder. But suddenly, a distant siren wailed from Downtona, reminder of higher responsibilities. Jade advanced a deliberate step, her voice ringing out, "I advise you to release me immediately. This is not a lawless land." Beads of sweat dotted her forehead, but her voice remained unwavering. When it became clear she would not yield, the lean officer cleared his throat, running his gaze over Jade's uniform. "You think you're safe because of this outfit and your shabby title?" He stepped in so close that his boot brushed her heel, Jade pivoted on her heel to keep her distance. Her eyes locked on his lips as he spoke. Then the lean officer snapped the handcuffs open, about to clamp them around her left wrist, but Jade shifted back just enough, simultaneously drawing her military ID from her chest pocket and holding it out before him. "Here are my credentials. Call your superiors if you don't believe me." The card glinted in mid-air before drifting down onto the dusty ground. Both officers stared at the navy blue ID card, fingers grazing the red-trimmed military seal. The burly officer's brow furrowed, the lean one's mouth fell open. Surprise, indignation, and wounded pride flashed across their features. Jade bent to retrieve the card and clipped it neatly back into her pocket. She straightened, hand resting lightly on the ID as if to underscore its authenticity. This was no charade. The air grew heavier still. The lean officer inhaled sharply and bit his lip. "Perhaps you ought to explain yourself more clearly." His tone was taunting, but the words betrayed his uncertainty. Jade responded evenly, with no hint of compromise. "I will not explain further unless you contact your commander or the federal prosecutor's office. Any unlawful detention could result in legal action." Her statement landed like a hammer blow, shattering the illusion of personal power. At that moment, a pale blue light flickered on their radar speed detector mounted to the Kara warning of a speeding violation. The burly officer hesitated, then muttered, "Actually, you're suspected of speeding." Jade's voice turned icy. "I slowed when I saw the sign. My GPS confirms I was within the limit." She emphasized each word, her gaze fixed on them. The lean officer turned to check his console, then waved a dismissive hand. "Fine. I'll call it in." He moved back to the patrol car and lifted his radio. As he crouched down, Jade took a swift step forward and placed her hand firmly on his shoulder. Standing tall, her eyes challenging him, "Feel free to detain me, but don't forget the law stands with me." Her calm resolve made him freeze, their eyes locking in a long, tense exchange. The radio crackled as the officer switched channels. Jade leaned against the car door, gripping her military ID, ready to face whatever directives came next. The wail of the speed trap siren and the radio chatter signaled that the next chapter was about to unfold, but here, in this abandoned lot beside the glaring white patrol car, true authority would not rest with those handcuffs, would be determined by those brave enough to uphold justice. When the whine of the speed detector still echoed in the air, the two officers' anger flared up like a wildfire. The burly officer slammed his hand onto Jade's shoulder and spun her sharply, wrenching her body to one side. Her cheek struck the metal side of the car, scorching hot under the southern sun, and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth onto the dusty ground. "Where's your army now, Colonel?" he snarled with contempt. But Jade remained resolute, her voice cold as steel. "You're both in the wrong." Oh, those few words, short yet weighty, made both officers stagger in surprise. The lean officer holding the gleaming handcuffs growled, "No one will believe you your word against two cops." Jade let out a bitter, rasping laugh that rang harshly in the sudden stillness. They exchanged bewildered looks at her steely composure. Then, abruptly, her gaze flicked down to the phone lying within reach at the curb. Without hesitation, she pivoted at the hips and moved with decisive speed. Her hand snatched up the device in an instant. The atmosphere exploded as Jade activated the emergency call, her finger flying over the screen to dial the secure line. Blake, the officer who had been poised to subdue her, yelled hoarsely, "Stop right there!" But it was too late. As soon as the call connected, Jade's voice rang out clearly. "Office of General Cole. I am under assault by local police. GPS active. Emergency protocol initiated." Time seemed to stretch. The world froze. Shaw whirled around, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" Before he could react, "I come." Authoritative voice crackled over Jade's speaker. "Copy. Support unit en route within 5 minutes. Maintain connection." They staggered back. Panic, replacing their earlier arrogance. Jade slipped the phone into her pocket and turned to face them. "I've called. You will explain yourselves to your commander." Then to the federal prosecutor. Pausing to let her words sink in, she continued, "Federal helicopters and task forces are inbound. I advise you to release me immediately." At that moment, the rumble of engines grew louder from around the corner, sharpening every sense. A black, unmarked SUV, no lights or insignia, rolled to a halt at the curb. Its rear door swung open, revealing 2 figures, a blonde woman in pristine military uniform and a silent, muscular black man whose presence carried the weight of authority. "Shaw." "Blake, let her go," the woman's clear, commanding voice rang out. Shaw hesitated, his grip still tight on Jade's shoulder. Blake stood agape, stunned by the sudden turn of events. The woman held up a bright red nameplate. "Supervisory Agent Miranda Quinn, United States Army." Her breath was steady, her gaze unyielding. "You are under arrest for assault, unlawful detention, and destruction of federal evidence. Hands behind your back and kneel," Quinn ordered. Shaw finally released Jade and bent forward to retrieve his cuffs. Blake panicked, trying to flee. But the black agent moved faster, taking him down with a precise takedown. The clash of cuffs snapped sharply in the hot air. Jade stood perfectly still, watching their arrests, blood at her lip, but her demeanor unbroken. Quinn approached her, tone grave. "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott, General Cole has ordered you to remain on site to complete the report. We will pursue federal charges and an internal investigation immediately." Jade nodded once, saying nothing. Her silence carried the weight of gratitude. The image of the 2 local officers kneeling in custody to her federal colleagues seared itself into Jade's mind. She glanced at them one last time, then turned and stepped lightly into the SUV. The door closed. The engine roared, and they disappeared around the corner. 3 days later, drone footage from the support unit went viral. Headlines blaring, 2 local cops charged with assaulting a black lieutenant colonel, federal response underway. Social media and newspapers alike carried the story. Jade sat quietly in the hospital waiting room, watching every report. She gave no interviews, made no statements, letting the footage and facts speak for themselves. Within 48 hours, Shaw and Blake were suspended without pay and federally charged with aggravated assault, abuse of authority, and obstruction of a military operation. The local police department's bland statement did little to quell public outrage. When Jade returned to her base, the entire battalion rendered a silent, formal salute. She walked the line, each step sure, her rank shining but without fanfare, only genuine respect. That evening, alone before a mirror, she removed the gauze from her lip. The bruise under her eye still dark, she unlaced her boot and placed it neatly aside. Gazing at her reflection, for the first time, tears fell not from fear, but from release. She understood that from the moment federal forces intervened, the law stood firmly on her side, and from that day on, Jade Prescott was more than a lieutenant colonel. She became a symbol of justice, strength, and hope for those who had never been heard. In just 2 strides, Jade deftly retrieved her phone without revealing any hint of surprise, every move the result of years of disciplined training. She placed her finger on the screen, quickly dialed the secure number, and pressed the device to her ear. The sweat on her brow seemed to lessen as her voice rang out calmly yet icily. "Office of General Cole. Lieutenant Colonel Prescott is under assault by local police. GPS emergency protocol has been activated." At that moment, the atmosphere seemed to freeze. The cicadas atop the tin roof fell silent, and the breeze whispering through the broken windows of the lot vanished, until one could hear their own breath. The two officers facing Jade halted in place, their eyes wide as they tried to process whether her words could be real. Their initial aggression gave way to panic and disbelief. Silence stretched so long, one could hear the faint rattle of Jade slipping the handset back into her pocket. Then the warm, authoritative voice crackled through the line, "Copy. Support unit is en route. Stay on the line." A faint click betrayed the opening of the emergency channel. After a brief pause, the voice continued, "Units will arrive in 5 minutes. Maintain connection." Oh. Jade felt every muscle tighten as she realized the situation had shifted decisively. She raised her head, eyes burning with determination, and addressed the two officers. "I've called. You have 2 choices. Release me immediately, or prepare to face serious legal consequences." Each word she spoke felt like a heavyweight hammer blow, extending the space between her and the 2 abusers. The lean officer's hands trembled as he stammered, "Are you bluffing?" His cheeks, once flushed with bravado, drained of color. The burly officer clenched his jaw, glancing nervously toward the patrol car, where the radio's crackle signaled the voice of their superiors. Jade narrowed her eyes but remained composed. "This is no joke. One more order, and your careers are over. Do you want to explain yourselves in federal court?" She held out her hand as if inviting them to act immediately. Under the scorching sun, her olive uniform seemed to blaze with authority, underscoring the urgent power behind her words. Their defiance wavered in the face of imminent consequence. The burly officer exchanged a tense look with his partner, mouth opening and closing as he struggled for words. The lean officer tensed as if ready to strike but hesitated. Their every movement felt suspended in the thick tension from across the lot. The black SUV had momentarily disappeared behind a graffiti-covered wall, but its engine's hum grew unmistakably closer. The deep-throated growl of the motor lent weight to Jade's warning. She tilted her head, listening intently to the revving engine, reminder of the force the 2 officers had never dared face. In that instant, memories of her mother's bedside flashed before Jade, the sterile hospital room, the drip of IV medication, her mother's pleading eyes. The recollection steeled her resolve to stand firm. She inhaled slowly, meeting the officers' panicked gazes head-on. "Decide now." The burly officer drew a slow, shuddering breath and finally released Jade's shoulder, though his hand hovered as if unable to let go of the pain he'd inflicted. The lean officer awkwardly removed the handcuff from Jade's wrist, holding it out like an apology. "Fine, you can go." His voice quivered with guilt. Jade frowned, her tone cool. "Remove both cuffs and step back. I will not tolerate another violation." They backed away, expanding the gap between them and Jade. She nodded once, lifted her foot off the car, and kept her back to neither of them while maintaining vigilance. As soon as she judged the distance safe, Jade casually tugged at her uniform sleeve, peeled off the cuff, held it for a moment, and then flung it onto the dusty concrete. The metallic clang against the pavement echoed like a stark reminder of the rule of law. Under her breath, she murmured, "Waiting for support. I'm not going anywhere." Then she pressed her hand to the bruise on her city, an echo of their struggle, and drew in a steady breath. The lot returned to uneasy silence, broken only by the wind through the broken windows and the approaching drone song of the SUV's engine. Jade looked up at the clear blue sky and quietly wondered, "I hope my father knows I'm okay." Before she could find an answer, priority lights flickered into view around the corner. Followed by the unmistakable staccato thrum of a helicopter, federal task force vehicles rolled in, encircling the 2 local officers who now cowered at the edge of the lot, Teams in black uniforms fanned out with precise coordination. One officer moved forward. Voice rich with authority. "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott. Apologies for the delay. Please board the vehicle." Jade inclined her head and walked toward the SUV. Her eyes drifting over the two local officers, one final team engraving in her mind that justice had arrived in time. She climbed in and sat opposite the federal commander as the doors closed. The SUV's tires crunched over gravel as it pulled away from the deserted lot, leaving behind the two disgraced local officers, frozen and staring after the dust trail. In the distance, the late afternoon sun gilded the treetops along the road, casting Jade's reflection through the tinted windows. She sat ramrod straight, confidence radiating, buoyed by the knowledge that the system had chosen her side. In that ripe moment, Jade Prescott understood. Justice never sleeps. In just 2 steps, Jade deftly retrieved her phone without revealing any hint of surprise, every move the result of years of ironclad training. She placed her fingertip on the screen, punched in the secure code, and pressed the device to her ear. The sweat on her brow seemed to ease as her voice rang out calm but icy. "Office of General Cole. Lieutenant Colonel Prescott is under assault by local police. GPS emergency protocol has been activated." In that moment, the air seemed to freeze. The cicadas atop the tin roof fell silent, and the breeze whispering through the garage frame died away until one could hear their own breath. The two officers facing Jade stood rooted, eyes wide, as if struggling to confirm that her words were real. Their initial aggression gave way to panic and disbelief. Silence stretched so long that one could hear the faint scrape of metal as Jade slipped the handset into her pocket. Then the warm, authoritative voice came through the line. "Copy. Support unit en route. Maintain connection." A subtle click betrayed the opening of the emergency channel. After a brief pause, the voice continued. "Units will arrive in 5 minutes. Stay on the line." Jade felt every muscle in her body tighten as she realized the situation had shifted decisively. She lifted her head, eyes blazing with determination, and turned to the two officers. "I've called. You have 2 choices. Release me immediately or prepare to face serious legal consequences." Each word she spoke landed like a leaden hammer, widening the gulf between her and the two abusers. The lean officer trembled as he stammered, "Are we being deceived?" Their once lush cheeks had gone ashen. The burly officer clenched his jaw, eyes flicking toward the patrol car. Where the radio crackled with the voice of their superiors, Jade furrowed her brow, maintaining her calm yet commanding posture. "This is no joke. One more order, and your careers are over. Do you want to explain yourselves in federal court?" She extended a hand as though inviting immediate action. Beneath the scorching sun, her olive uniform seemed to glow with authority, underscoring the urgent power behind every syllable. Defiance flickered in their eyes, but the awareness of consequences began to prevail. The burly officer shot a look at his partner, mouth agape as if seeking words. The lean officer squared his shoulders as though ready to force compliance, but then hesitated. Every motion felt suspended in the thick tension. Across the garage, a black SUV gleamed before disappearing behind a graffiti-covered wall. Yet its engine's hum remained unmistakable. The low growl of the motor lent weight to Jade's warning. She tilted her head, listening intently to the engine, drawing closer, a force the two officers had never dared confront. In that instant, memories of her mother's hospital bed flashed before Jade's mind. The sterile room, the drip of IV medication, her mother's pleading eyes. Those recollections steeled her resolve. She inhaled steadily and met the officer's panicked gazes head-on. "Decide now." "Oh." The burly officer let out a long, shuddering breath and finally released Jade's shoulder. Though his hand brushed the blood on her uniform, The lean officer awkwardly unclasped the handcuff from her wrist and held it out like a reluctant apology. "All right, you may go." His voice quavered with guilt. Jade narrowed her eyes, her tone icy. "Remove your cuffs and step back. I will not tolerate another violation." The two officers backed away, increasing the distance between them and Jade. She gave a slight nod, lifted her foot from the car, and kept her back to neither of them, maintaining vigilant watch. Once she judged the distance safe, Jade casually tugged at her uniform sleeve, peeled the cuff from her left wrist, held it briefly, and then tossed it onto the dusty concrete. The metallic clang against the pavement echoed like a stark reminder of lawful authority. Under her breath, she murmured, "Waiting for support. I'm not going anywhere." Then she pressed her hand to the bruise on her side, the scar of their struggle, and drew in a deep breath. The garage fell back into uneasy silence, broken only by the wind through the rafters and the SUV's engine growing louder. Jade looked up at the clear blue sky and quietly wondered, "I hope my father knows I'm safe." Before an answer could form, priority lights flickered around the corner, followed by the staccato beat of a helicopter rotors. Federal task force vehicles rolled in, surrounding the two local officers, who now cowered at the lot's edge. Teams in black uniforms fanned out with precise coordination. One officer stepped forward, voice resonant with authority. "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott. Apologies for our delay. Please board the vehicle." Jade inclined her head and walked toward the SUV, casting the two officers one final glancito, engrave in her memory that justice had arrived just in time. She climbed in and sat opposite the federal commander as the doors closed. The SUV's tires crunched over gravel as it pulled away, leaving the two local officers standing stunned amid the receding dust. In the distance, late afternoon sunlight gilded the roadside trees, casting Jade's reflection through the tinted windows. She sat ramrod straight, confidence radiating from her, buoyed by the knowledge that the system had chosen her side. In that ripe moment, Jade Prescott understood justice never sleeps. In the ultimate moment of desperation, Shaw snatched Jade's phone from her hand and slammed it down onto the parched sidewalk. The crack of shattered glass rang out, immediately followed by the thunk of his boot crushing the screen in a single stomp. "That's your call," he roared like a wounded beast, eyes alight with savage glee. Jade didn't flinch. Her steel-cold gaze remained locked on Shaw, a silent challenge in her expression. Blake, witnessing the scene, staggered backward, then suddenly lunged forward, yanking Jade's hair in a brutal tug at the nape of her neck. A sharp pain shot through her spine, but instead of crying out, Jade only furrowed her brow and braced herself for reaction. All her senses surged, each close-quarters control technique she'd practiced, each self-defense drill endured under harsh training. She felt the road's heat press into her scalp and the weight of Blake's hand tighten. Just before Blake could throw the next punch, a thunderous roar erupted from the corner, engines revving, metal clashing, and the black SUV's door swinging open. The vehicle pulled up to the curb, lights off, yet bearing an undeniable authority, its sleek body gleaming under the late-day sun. The sequence happened so fast that Shaw and Blake had no time to react. Two figures spilled forth from the SUV. First came a tall, blonde woman in a dark windbreaker uniform, shoulders squared in unquestionable command. Her boots hammered the pavement in measured strides. Behind her stood a towering, muscular black man, face impassive, but with a faint, knowing smile of someone fully aware of his power. Time seemed to freeze in that instant, with only the heat rising from the road and the distant thrum of helicopter blades signaling the arrival of federal forces. The woman raised her hand in a precise gesture. "Shaw, Blake, release her." Her tone wasn't drawn out, it snapped like a blade. Cutting off every violent impulse, Shaw froze, loosening his grip on Jade's hair as he reflexively drew his cuffs from his belt. Blake, face pale with fear, hastily stumbled backward. Jade exhaled softly, her eyes never leaving her attackers. In that rare pause, the woman swept off her cap, revealing a shining U.S. Army insignia and the nameplate reading Supervisory Agent Miranda Quinn. She raised a vivid red badge before them. Voice steely, "You are under arrest for assault, unlawful detention, and destruction of federal evidence. Kneel and place your hands behind your back immediately." Shaw ground a shattered brick underfoot, gritting his teeth as he dropped to one knee and raised his arms. Blake scrambled to comply, but before he could protest, the black agent moved in, one lightning-quick neck control, and Blake hit the ground with his hands cuffed in front of him. The resounding clink of metal undercut the silence like a thunderclap. Marking the end of the two local officers' abuse of power, Jade watched the arrest with unwavering calm. Dried blood crusted her lip, the bruise along her cheekbone a testament to the violence. Yet she showed no weakness. The windbreaker-clad woman closed the distance, leveling her gaze at Jade with stern compassion. "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott, apologies for our delay. I'm Supervisory Agent Quinn of the UAJS Army. We received your call for support and will escort you safely. These officers will be taken into custody immediately." Jade gave a slight nod. Her composed bearing radiating authority, she offered a brief salute to her federal colleagues, then turned to the two kneeling local officers. Her eyes held no hatred, only the iron edge of justice. "Remember this day," she said, voice loud enough for them to hear. "Any abuse of power carries a price." The line of black SUVs stretched along the curb, their emergency lights blinking faintly. A uniformed Army agent gestured, "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott, please board the vehicle. Medical and legal teams are standing by." Jade strode toward the tinted glass SUV, each step purposeful on the dust-choked pavement. She did not look back, but her gaze swept the kneeling officers until the door closed. The convoy rolled away under federal protection. The SUV's engine hummed smoothly. Mingling with a helicopter's whine overhead, Jade sat facing Quinn. Calm, yet infused with undeniable strength. She nodded once, pressing a hand to the ribbon on her chest where her honor badge glinted. Outside, Shaw and Blake were lifted into a federal police vehicle, their faces hollow with remorse and fear. The armored trucks navigated narrow streets, tires crunching fragments of shattered glass. The golden afternoon light bathed Jade's olive uniform in a hazy halo, a living testament to the power of the law standing with her. Within the hospital precinct, a public address system crackled. Local officers Shaw and Blake have been detained and will face federal charges for abuse of authority and assault. Through the window, Jade saw nurses and security personnel rushing to meet her at the emergency entrance. She relaxed slightly, a sad smile touching her lips at last. Her mother would know she wasn't alone. The SUV wheeled to a stop before the ward doors, its door swinging open with a mechanical hiss. Jade stepped out, bowed her head in thanks to Quinn and the team, then leaned against the doorframe and drew in a deep breath of the chaotic air. Each step of Lieutenant Colonel Prescott resonated down the hospital corridor, marking a triumph of justice. When she reached her mother's room window, trembling hands pushed open the door. In the warm glow of the room's lights, she saw her mother's eyes closed in peaceful sleep. Her pallor lightened. Yada sat beside her, took her hand, and whispered, "I'm home. Mom." What Jade achieved was more than a fight for herself. It was a fulfillment of her oath to uphold the Constitution and protect the vulnerable. In her heart, the flame of that struggle would never demand. The story of Lieutenant Colonel Jade Prescott would be told forever as a symbol of justice that never yields. The instant the clink of the cuffs echoed, the air snapped, taut, as if ready to tear apart. A tall blonde woman stepped out of the black SUV. Every stride, a cold blade slicing through the stifling tension. She marched toward Shaw and Blake with steely eyes and a voice like iron. "Shaw!" "Blake, release her at once." Blake froze. His hand still gripping Jade's hair, Shaw steadied himself but dared not resist. Behind the woman, the SUV's door swung open, heralding the arrival of federal force. She held aloft a bright, red-stamped dossier. "I am Supervisory Agent Miranda Quinn, United States Army. You are under arrest for assault, unlawful detention, and destruction of federal evidence." That litany of titles alone declared her supreme authority. Shaw hesitated. Face twitching, Blake still stood rooted. Unable to comprehend how events had turned so swiftly, Quinn needed no further warning. She took 3 measured steps, forward each footfall a command, "Let her go, or you will be looking directly down the barrel of my sidearm." Her tone never rose. Its sheer chill formed an impregnable barrier. As she finished speaking, hands still poised on the badge. No one dared defy her. Shaw bit his lip, his skin draining from scarlet to ashen. Blake's hands shook as he unclasped Jade's cuff and set it on the pavement. The metallic clang on concrete rang like a death knell for their abuse of power. 2 federal officers now flanked Quinn. Behind her stood Agent Rivera, a towering, powerfully built, black man whose cold eyes and measured presence spoke volumes. Together, they formed a silent legion whose every gesture embodied seamless coordination. Rivera stepped forward, snapped a new pair of cuffs onto Shaw's wrists, then gently but firmly secured Blake with a second set. The twin clink-clink marked the final chapter of their unwarranted violence. Jade stood amid the federal circle, her uniform still crisp, traces of dried blood at her lip. Under the waning afternoon sun, she looked both vulnerable and unbreakable. Quinn lowered her dossier and approached Jade with respectful solemnity. "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott, everything is under federal control. We will escort you to safety and finalize our report immediately." Jade offered a slight nod, no words needed, and turned her gaze toward the idling SUV. Other agents fanned out swiftly, securing the scene, collecting shards of the shattered phone, photographing bloodstains on the patrol car, documenting the entire incident. Each action was methodical, precise as though carving into hard evidence every transgression of Shaw and Blake. Quinn pivoted back, eyes sweeping over the 2 kneeling local officers. "All evidence has been recorded. They will answer to the full extent of the law." Her words solidified Jade's faith in justice. Easing the last cold beads of sweat on her palms, the SUV's rear doors yawned open to reveal dark leather seats, communications gear, medical supplies, and military documentation. Rivera offered Jade his hand, while Quinn gently gestured to an open seat. "Please, Lieutenant Colonel." Jade ascended the step, inclined her head in thanks, and seated herself securely. The door snapped shut behind her with a solid thud as the vehicle rolled away, leaving the 2 local officers to be lifted into the awaiting federal police cruiser. Outside, emergency lights pulsed. Sirens built to a crescendo as the escort moved out. Jade looked through the tinted window to onlookers frozen in shock. She sat ramrod straight, dabbed at her lip with a handkerchief, then turned to Quinn. "Thank you, Supervisory Agent." Quinn nodded, voice steady. "Your rank and honor are protected, ma'am. This incident will be forwarded to Army Command and Congress as an example of prompt federal response." The convoy threaded narrow city streets at a safe speed. Above, a helicopter maintained its circling sweep, recording every angle. On Rivera's dashboard monitor, crisp frames of the arrest looped in real time. Jade watched in silence, her trust in the system she served deepening. After enduring so much, she knew true power lay in lawful authority and unified resolve. When they arrived at the base entrance, medical personnel and security stood ready. Jade disembarked, bowed respectfully to Quinn and Rivera, then strode into the compound with purposeful steps. Beneath the fluttering American flag, she felt each heartbeat of victory, not solely for herself, but for anyone ever overlooked. Inside the base conference room, senior officers and federal attorneys had convened. Quinn presented the incident, supported by images and helicopter footage. Jade sat opposite them, her calm yet imposing presence undimmed. As the lead attorney concluded, the chief of staff tapped his pen on the table and intoned, "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott, the upcoming hearing will include the federal director. Thank you for upholding your oath and defending the Constitution." Jade inclined her head slightly and murmured, "Just doing my duty, sir." Today's lessons etched themselves into her spirit. Justice is enforced not just through words, but through decisive action and transparent authority. As she exited the boardroom, a smattering of applause followed, quiet, but enough to affirm her colleagues' respect and confidence. In the base hallway, Jade paused before a large window and gazed at the clear sky beyond. She closed her eyes, drew a long breath, and then continued forward. Behind her, the conference room doors closed, marking the end of a harrowing chapter in Lieutenant Colonel Jade Prescott's story. All lights would dim before long, but the flame of her pursuit of justice would burn on eternally. In that chaotic instant, Blake struggled fiercely, swinging his heel as he tried to run toward the gleaming white patrol car. But before he could reach its front, a muscular black agent sprang at him without warning. With a lightning-quick wristlock and elbow strike, the agent slammed Blake onto the cracked, grease-stained pavement. The heavy thud of the man hitting the ground echoed like thunder across the suddenly silent lot, immediately followed by the sharp click of handcuffs snapping into place around Blake's wrists. Ringing steel-hard in the taut air, Jade, still standing erect beside the patrol car, watched every movement, her olive uniform's shoulder and chest seams grabbed and frayed speckled with dirt, and droplets of blood still glistened on her lip. Lady-o-day sunlight filtered through a thin haze of dust, illuminating each torn thread and every bead of sweat, underscoring the unyielding courage etched on her pain-scarred face. Though her legs trembled with fatigue and her body ached, she kept her spine rigid, her eyes fixed on Blake as he writhed helplessly beneath the agent's powerful hold. In a single moment, all of Blake's resistance was extinguished. He lay still on the concrete, panting heavily, sweat beading his forehead, muttering futile curses. The snap of the cuffs locked him forever out of power. No one spoke, only the soft footfall of Quinn as she approached Jade. Amid the post-skirmish scene, Quinn paused beside Jade, her gaze gentle yet resolute. She inclined her head and, in a measured voice brimming with authority, said, "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott, General Cole has requested that you remain here. This matter will proceed with federal charges and an internal investigation immediately." Quinn's words were quiet, yet they reverberated in Jade's mind like an alarm bell. She understood that every action taken had been under the highest command's scrutiny, and cooperation was now mandatory. Jade gave a slight nod, saying nothing further. Her silent assent said it all. She had fulfilled her duty, employed her authority as a federal officer correctly, and now the wheels of justice would turn. She slowly clenched her sleeves at the wrists, her lips pressing together to steady her resolve. In that moment, though her heart swelled with anger at the assault and outrage at the abuse of power she had witnessed, she knew this was no time for weakness. Her dignified silence was the strongest statement she could make to anyone who had ever underestimated her. Around them, federal agents pressed on with their tasks. One team gathered evidences hards of shattered phone glass, dried blood on the patrol car, footprints, and displaced gravel on the concrete. Another group reconstructed the scene, sketching positions of each person and quickly recording witness statements. The operation was so professional that no one could deny its impartiality. Quinn watched and nodded in satisfaction, then turned to Jade. "All evidence has been fully collected. We will forward the documentation to the Federal Legal Division tonight." "Oh," Jade offered a weary half-smile and felt her chest lighten. She placed a hand on her waist where a bruise still swelled and drew a deep breath. Thoughts of her mother in the hospital, her fragile shoulders waiting for her return, gave Jade the strength to stand tall. Quinn lightly touched her arm in a gesture of encouragement. "You did the right thing. Rest assured. Justice is on your side." As the final rays of sunset painted the sky, the armored federal vehicle rumbled up to collect Jade. Rivera stood at the curb, his gaze serious yet warm as he offered Jade an understanding nod, then joined Quinn in escorting her to the rear door. She stepped onto the leather bench seat, settling among communication gear. The agents swiftly closed the door, crackled a departure order over the radio, and the SUV rolled away from the scene. Jade raised a hand to shield her eyes from the sun and glanced back at the two local officers being lifted into the awaiting police cruiser, images of their defeat and remorse stark in their hollow eyes. The vehicle sped toward the military headquarters where Jade would remain to finalize her report. Inside, no one spoke. Only the soft hum of the engine and the whir of the air conditioning fan broke the silence. Jade dabbed at her lip with a handkerchief, then fell silent, staring out the window. She reflected on her years of training and the ideals of defending the Constitution that had fortified her courage. She pictured the forthcoming investigative conclusions, the hearings, the formal briefings. Yet she knew, armed with truth and solid evidence, no one could deny justice. When the convoy reached the base gates, headlights illuminated the Fort Moore sign, white letters on a dark green backdrop. Military medical staff and security personnel greeted Jade and guided her into a small conference room. Quinn followed, occasionally handing Jade documents and files for her signature. Under the cold fluorescent lights, Jade felt each keystroke of the printer, the rip of paper, the scratch of a pen stamping a seal, every action affirming one thing: her case had become a federal priority. A single hush fell as Jade placed her pen to the final page of the report. The red seal of the federal agency was stamped across the last sheet, a definitive signature of ultimate legal authority. She slowly set down her pen, drew in a deep breath, and surveyed the room. The faces of senior officers shone with admiration and respect. No applause erupted, only nods and exchanged glances, representing an entire system standing behind her. In the corridor outside, Jade heard the intercom announcement. The case of assault against a federal officer has been classified as high priority and must be resolved within 72 hours. She smiled inwardly. The process was now unstoppable. She strode down the long corridor, each footstep echoing as proof of truth and law prevailing. Before returning to her quarters, Jade paused at a window overlooking the training fields, bathed in sunset hues. She closed her eyes, letting the gentle breeze from the open window ripple through her hair. The day's event: surviving violence, summoning support, rallying federal forces, gathering evidence would forever be etched in her memory. She smiled to herself and thought, "I have fulfilled my responsibility." 3 days after the incident, the world seemed to awaken to the footage captured by a military drone over the vacant lot. The 2-minute video showed the entire sequence, from the moment Jade was shoved against the patrol car to the instant officers Shaw and Blake collapsed under the federal agent's takedown. Blake's body slamming onto the cracked concrete echoed with a heavy thud. The handcuffs snapping shut with a definitive clink. And the image of Quinn, the blonde agent issuing the arrest order, provided incontrovertible evidence. Within hours of an anonymous user uploading it to social media, the video raced across news websites and feeds, and ultimately appeared on television networks nationwide, under the sensational headline, "2 officers arrested after assaulting Black Lieutenant Colonel Federal Response Underway." Jade Prescott sat on a bench in the hospital waiting room, where her mother was recovering from emergency heart surgery. The dim overhead lights, the steady hum of the air conditioner, and the soft footsteps of nurses and doctors were the only sounds breaking the hush. On the wall-mounted television, the broadcast replayed the drone footage, intercut with legal experts analyzing the blatant violation of constitutional rights inherent in the unprovoked detention and violence inflicted upon a federal officer. One commentator called it a textbook example of police overreach. Another emphasized, the federal government cannot stay silent in the face of such a flagrant breach of the Constitution. But Jade granted no interviews. She remained silent, glancing up at the screen only briefly before turning her gaze back to her mother. She knew that anything she said could be twisted. Any public statement might dilute the raw impact of the images circulating nationwide. Instead of speaking on camera, Jade chose to let the evidence speak for her. The drone footage, the audio recording of her emergency call, her medical report confirming her injuries, and the initial federal investigation files, all would be compiled, reviewed, and preserved as irrefutable documentation. Within 48 hours of the video leak, officers Shaw and Blake were stripped of their pay and suspended from duty. Their badges were confiscated and hung in storage. And their reputations became a subject of whispered gossip throughout the department. They were formally charged with assault, abuse of authority, and interference with a military operation under the Federal Officer Protection Act. That very evening, the U.S. Attorney's Office filed criminal charges and petitioned for their pretrial detention pending investigation. Jade's colleagues at Fort Moore received internal memos demanding cooperation in providing statements, images, and any relevant records. In a bid to salvage its image, the local police department issued a conciliatory press release. They regretted the incident, pledged to cooperate fully with the federal inquiry, and vowed to review training procedures and internal oversight to prevent future occurrences. The statement appeared on the department's official website and was distributed to local media outlets. However, it was too little, too late to regain public trust. Viewers and readers, having seen the drone footage, responded with outrage. Apologies won't undo these acts. It's not enough to criticize unlawful detentions. A full, transparent investigation is imperative. Editorials called for complete transparency and full accountability from the local force. Jade listened in silence to each broadcast but never took her eyes off her mother. She understood that in the coming days, public attention would shift from criminal charges to the internal review to congressional hearings. She knew the nature of power. Sometimes silence and patience are the best means to protect the truth. About 2 days later, a team of reporters arrived at the hospital, hoping to interview Jade. They set up cameras and lights and called into the waiting room. "Lieutenant Colonel Prescott, may we have your comments on the recent events?" But the hospital administrator deftly declined. "I'm sorry. Colonel Prescott is undergoing physical and psychological recovery. We request that you return at a later time." The brief news segment they aired showed only the hospital exterior, accompanied by a voiceover. "The colonel's condition is stable, and the family wishes to maintain privacy." That was enough to imply Jade's continued refusal to appear on camera. By the third night, the nation's largest news network ran a special report. They replayed the drone footage, showed the 2 local officers kneeling in cuffs, and then invited experts in public safety. criminal law, and human rights to comment. The half-hour discussion featured no accusations leveled at Jade. Every opinion affirmed her status as the victim and praised her calm, intelligent, and lawful response. Social media comments overwhelmingly agreed. A black woman in uniform abused unacceptable. Lieutenant Colonel Prescott acted with dignity, not vengeance. She only demanded that the law defend her. Oh? In the days that followed, the story moved off front-page headlines and into the legal and political sections. Yet the resonance of those images and the video persisted. Each replay reminded the public of constitutional values and the fine line between law enforcement and abuse of power. Jade knew she had set a precedent. Anyone who abused authority against a federal officer would be made to answer. In the hospital waiting room, Jade's mother caught her smiling softly and gently squeezed her hand. Her mother's warm, trusting eyes provided Jade with boundless energy. Jade bowed her head, returned the smile, and then looked up at the final news bulletin of the night. Officers Shaw and Blake to appear in court next week. We will continue to update the legal proceedings. Jade nodded, understanding that the path to justice was still ahead, but proud that she had stood firm from the very start. When the armored vehicle rolled through the main gate of Fort Moore, Lieutenant Colonel Jade Prescott's silhouette emerged beneath the verdant canopy. The entire battalion stood at attention along the parade ground, eyes fixed on her in silent reverence. There was no blaring trumpet fanfare, no booming commands, only a profound stillness. In that moment, Jade's footsteps on the concrete seemed to underscore the weight of each stride, each step bound to duty and pride in serving as a federal officer. They did not cheer or wave flags. Their steady, respectful gaze spoke volumes. "We stand with you." As the formation dispersed, Jade quietly entered the barracks. Its red brick walls lined with historic photographs in the entrance hall. She did not climb a podium or receive any formal citation. Instead, she simply nodded to her superiors and comraded, a gesture sufficient to convey gratitude and solidarity. The steel door closed behind her, ending a journey of hardship but opening a new chapter, one of healing and peace after the storm. A shaft of late-day sunlight through a narrow window illuminated her olive uniform, lending solemn dignity to the woman who had endured so much. That evening, in her modest quarters, Jade sat alone before a wall-mounted mirror. The warm yellow light stretched her reflection, casting long shadows that traced each bruise still visible beneath her skin. She slowly removed her combat boots, leather scuffed from the day's ordeal, her toes grazing the cool floor. As she loosened the laces, each coil slipping free seemed to mark another rung on the ladder of a life dedicated to service. Looking at her own face in the glass, determined yet weary, eyes bright with resolve, saw more than a soldier. She saw every lesson learned under fire. Tears welled and spilled down her cheeks, not of fear or pain, but of the burden she had carried for so long. Memories flickered back. The first day she earned her rank, her competence questioned because of her skin, the countless training exercises where she proved herself every hour, the whispers of, "Does she belong?" echoing through corridors. Now, in the quiet of her room, she realized her uniform was more than fabricate, was a shield, a testament to her right to respect and protection. She wept, but not from weakness. Each tear bore the pride of her journey. Jade placed her hand over her chest, feeling the glinting rank insignia beneath her blouse. This time, its weight was real, not just a title but a symbol of justice that had answered her call. The silence that once stifled her voice had been shattered by decisive action and unyielding effort. She allowed herself a small, triumphant smile, as though exhaling long-held tension, and whispered, "This is who I am, and this is real strength." In that moment, her reflection became an icon, a black woman, a federal officer, unbowed in the face of injustice. Outside the barracks, squad cars' lights still blinked in the distance as patrols maintained security. Jade rose, set her sunglasses on the dresser, and stepped out into the cool evening air. She inhaled deeply, feeling the chill air brush her face. Ahead lay more challenges: the upcoming trial, congressional hearings, and supporting fellow officers. But she would not face them alone. Her uniform had become the key to equality, justice, and respect. The door clicked shut behind her, closing a chapter of trials and opening a new horizon where silence had been broken and justice had spoken. 3 months have passed since the drone footage ignited nationwide attention, and its resonance still lingers inside Fort Moore and beyond. This morning, Jade Prescott awoke before dawn, sunlight filtering through the blinds, reminding her of yesterday's court verdict. She recalled the solemn courtroom where judges had sentenced Shaw and Blake to federal prison terms of 1 to 2 years for assault, abuse of authority, and obstruction of military operations. That judgment not only delivered justice for her but sent a clear message: federal officers will be protected from abuse of power. In the wake of the trial, Army Command issued directives to strengthen collaboration protocols between federal forces and local police, and to mandate constitutional respect and de-escalation training. At Fort Moore, Jade was invited to deliver the keynote at the inaugural Federal-Local Partnership Conference, where she called for empathy and unity. We must learn to listen to one another. We serve under the same law, and every officer deserves protection. Her words drew a sustained ovation and launched lasting reforms in joint operations and mutual respect. Over the past 3 months, Jade has appeared in features on women's leadership, human rights advocacy, and diversity. She joined a United Nations webinar on Women in Armed Forces Breaking Stereotypes, sharing, "I'm no hero, just someone who stood up when the Constitution was trampled. Every officer, regardless of gender or skin color, deserves respect." Those remarks are now quoted in training curricula at police and military academies, inspiring a new generation to prioritize fairness. On a personal level, those months have marked Jade's quiet recovery. The bruise on her side and the scar on her lip have faded, but memories of the shove and the clink of cuffs remain vivid. Jade spends her weekend afternoons practicing yoga and meditation on base to restore her inner calm. She's also enrolled in a short memoir writing course, planning to document her recent experiences to motivate her peers. In civilian communities, the Support Federal Officers campaign launched by human rights organization SHA's funded improved waiting areas in military hospitals, complete with informational displays on federal officer rights and hotlines for reporting abuse. Jade lends her name and image to posters and flyers, encouraging bystanders to speak out. Reports of police power abuses to hotline centers in major cities have surged, reflecting a positive shift in public awareness. 3 months on, Jade's family celebrated her mother's recovery and discharge from the hospital. One afternoon, Jade drove her mother around the base in a vintage Jeep, savoring peace after the storm. Her mother smiled, saying, "You've made us so proud." Jade squeezed her hand and replied, "We fought this together, Mom." Jade's career has also reached new heights. She was specially nominated for promotion to full colonel in recognition of her outstanding service, safeguarding the law and championing constitutional respect. The promotion ceremony was held quietly in the base auditorium, with only her comrades and family present. As the brigadier general pinned her new rank, he said, "You've proved that justice demands courage." Those words fortified Jade for the road ahead. In addition to her command duties, Jade now serves as an advisor to the National Security Policy Council, helping draft the Rights and Responsibilities of Federal Officers Decree. Hair draft. praised for its balance between civilian protections and enabling federal officers to perform their duties. Sailed through high-level votes and is due to take effect in 6 months. 3 months after the storm, the echo of Jade Prescott's stand of a black federal officer confronting abuse of power and sparking systemic change still resonates among her comrades and the wider community. Her story reminds everyone that justice is not remote. It begins when individuals dare to speak up and uphold the Constitution. Jade knows the path ahead remains long. But with truth as her foundation and incontrovertible proof behind her, she is confident that the light of justice will guide those who champion it across the land. Exactly 1 year has passed since the drone footage sparked a wave of change. And Lieutenant Colonel Jade Prescott now walks through the main hall of the Department of Defense, her face radiant beneath the carved motto, "Protect the Constitution. Protect the people." The public address system summons the Morning Colors ceremony, and the honor guard marches past her. No longer a bystander in a legal battle, Jade has become one of the Army's top leaders in federal-local relations. In her role as Deputy Commander for Federal Local Affairs, she helped enact the Federal Officer Protection Act, which standardizes the powers and duties of federal officers nationwide. This legislation was ratified by Congress 6 months ago after public hearings in which Jade served as the chief witness. The law stipulates that any use of detention, force, or violence against a federal officer shall be immediately investigated by an independent federal counsel, separate from local law enforcement. It also expands witness protection provisions so that citizens and colleagues can report abuses without fear of retaliation. As a result, reports of police misconduct in major cities have dropped by 30% compared to the previous year, and 80% of complaints are resolved within 90 days. At Fort Moore, the federal local partnership program Jade launched has become mandatory Army-wide training. This 2-week course combines constitutional instruction, crisis communication skills, and joint-to-operations scenarios. 200 officers completed the inaugural session, rating it 98% satisfactory. Many graduates have since become instructors themselves, spreading mutual respect principles across the force. Meanwhile, former officers Shaw and Blake served their federal sentences. They performed community service in a national park restoration program and were officially terminated from the local police force for gross misconduct. A public education segment even showed them clearing litter under a hot sun, wearing hard hats labeled, "I violated the Constitution." Public reactions split. Many condemned their actions, while some lamented the careers lost. Jade declined involvement in that media piece, requesting simply that the punishment not become a spectacle. On a personal level, Jade has found balance between her career and her private life. Her mother, fully recovered, toured the base now named Prescott Plaza in her honor. On Saturday evenings, mother and daughter cooked together. Her mother's chicken curry recipe from a 1975 trip to India always brings Jade a smile. That family warmth fuels Jade's resolve to continue fighting injustice. Jade also completed her memoir, Breaking the Silence. Released 3 months ago, it quickly became a bestseller, praised for blending personal narrative with astute legal insight. Forbes's Women Leaders issue named her one of the 50 most influential women for institutionalizing human rights protections. Jade explained, "I'm not a hero, just someone who spoke up when the Constitution was under threat. Every officer, regardless of gender or race, deserves respect." On the international stage, Jade represented the U.S. at the Geneva Human Rights Forum, presenting the federal officer protection model as a scalable initiative. Delegations from France and Canada have since visited Fort Moore to learn from its example. Jade smiled at the global interest but reminded partners, Protecting those who enforce the law is protecting civilians. It ensures the safety of every citizen. 1 year later, Jade Prescott's legacy is clearer than ever. Not just a story of a black officer confronting abuse of power, but the genesis of sweeping reform under the quiet glow of the inscription, "Protect the Constitution. Protect the people." Its promise has become reality. Whenever the sound of unjust cuffs rings out, the clang of the law will answer. Jade knows the journey is not over, but she takes pride in having ignited the flame of justice and trusts that it will never go out. If Lieutenant Colonel Jade Prescott's journey has inspired you, if you resonate with the values of equality and justice she championed, don't let the feeling end here. Hit subscribe to our channel so you never miss our upcoming videos, where we continue to share true stories of courageous individuals, pivotal events shaping society, and timeless lessons. Each week, we bring you exclusive content, on-the-ground reports, eyewitness interviews, and in-depth analyses from legal experts, human rights advocates, and social scholars. Our channel offers more than just entertainment. It carries the mission of delivering accurate information and building a responsible viewership. By subscribing and turning on notifications, you become part of a network that spreads truth and exerts positive pressure to uphold humanistic values. You'll learn more about the fight against racial discrimination, ongoing reforms in law enforcement, and global human rights trends. Please share this video with friends, family, and colleagues to spark discussion, raise questions, and inspire action. We always welcome feedback from our community to improve future episodes. Subscribe today so you never miss another inspiring story, because only when we connect and engage can justice truly stay awake. Thank you for joining us on the journey to protect truth and justice.